Hello and welcome to my studio. I clean up pretty nice when I'm not dressed in my studio ragamuffin garb, huh? Let's get right into the tip today. I'm surrounded by one of my favorite things in life, books. Hey, don't forget to subscribe below if you want to hear more writing tips and art tips. And don't forget to hit that notification icon so that you never miss an episode. Let's get back in it. So, this is it. This is tip number 5 of my top 5 writing tips. Today's tip is about scene structure. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the scene structure, I've got to touch back on perspective a little bit. It'll make sense. Stay with me. Remember, there is first person, second person, third person, limited, third person, omniscient. Just a brief example of a reminder for first person is, I hurried into the room. The massive hole in the wall was a shock. An example of second person. When you walked into the room, you were surprised by the new hole in the wall. Example of third person limited. Sarah was confused by the hole in the wall. Mark looked oddly calm. An example of third person omniscient. Sarah was confused by the hole in the wall. Mark kept his calm, but inside his heart beat fast as he worried how Sarah would respond. First person is the main character's perspective. Second person is the reader's perspective. Third person limited is certain characters' perspective. Third person omniscient is everyone's perspective. Now, with that brief reminder of perspective, you can use that to start building your scene with some fundamentals. Those being, what perspective are you writing your book in? Is it a filler scene or is it a building scene? Now let's get into what that means. When you're reading a book, you are always reading something, whether it's boring or dynamic, something is happening. And we need the story to contain important elements like scenery, landscape, time, characters, who's there, what's there. A filler scene is just that. You are filling in the blanks. You're giving the details. You are setting up your story. This is like the bones of your story. The meat of your story are those dynamic scenes where something bigger is happening. These dynamic type of scenes is what moves your story along and what your plot is made of. This type of scene is where you have your characters doing something, whether they're meeting up, they're arguing, fighting, or they're just talking. Not all dynamic scenes have dialogue. Here's a formula for moving your dynamic scenes along. First, you have a goal, conflict, disaster, reaction, dilemma, and a decision. You can have multiple of these throughout the same story. Your filler scenes are going to go in between these bigger points and build your story. Your reader wants to be entertained. Conflict in real life is not fun. Conflict in a book is essential. If the goal was reached too easily, it's unrealistic and it's not that fun. Readers want to relate to your story and they want to be moved by it, but they also love the juicy, gory details of struggle and strife. Don't be scared to add a good bit of it, but be careful not to overdo it. Let's use Little Women as an example. There are many characters with lots of different goals, and they all struggle for different reasons. They have many obstacles, but they end up having a decent ending because they persevered and they tried and tried again. With that formula where you have a goal, conflict, disaster, reaction, dilemma, and decision, write that down. You don't want to forget. Here's another way to frame it for you to make sense. You start your book. You start it in a very gripping way that gets the reader wanting to stay with your book. Maybe you introduce the goal pretty early on and you want to have conflict started pretty soon. And then that's when the disaster happens. And in between, going from the goal, you see the stages that the character takes, and they try, and then there's conflict, which creates this disaster. And then they have a reaction to this disaster, and they can choose to just move on and deal with the hand that's been dealt, or they can go back and they can try again a different way. They can revisit the old plan that they had to achieve that goal and revamp it, make it new, or they can try something totally different. That's where you get your dilemma and your decision. Reading a book is like peeking behind the scenes, which is a really great way to use those filler scenes. And there's not really a formula that I have for filler scenes, but I will say, cut out unnecessary verbiage. Make sure that you are direct and to the point. Obviously, a book has a lot of words, but don't be too wordy. Lead the reader to what's happening. Don't just be so on the nose about it. Don't be so pointed about what's happening. Oh my gosh, you made it to the end. Ah! Clap for yourself. If you've been following along, it has taken 10 weeks to get here because I alternate writing tips with art tips. So these have been my top 5 writing tips, and they have all compiled onto each other to really help give you a good foundation to start with so that you have something to move forward using these tools that hopefully I have articulated pretty well. Just like episode 1 said, reading is a great way to see what works in a book. If you read something and you like it, it's very possible that someone else is going to like that as well. Episode 2 of my writing series was all about making a deadline for yourself and make it work for you. Episode 3, keeping notes. This is a great way to build your story because you are writing it from these notes that you're keeping. It's kind of my version, I guess, of an outline. And also when you get a really good idea, you don't want to lose it and you certainly don't want to forget it. So write it down. Episode 4, when we talked all about dialogue and how a mature audience is really going to appreciate you cutting out the he said, she said, and you just get right into the dialogue because you have structured your paragraph in a way that the reader knows who is speaking. And now this episode, where we went over scene structure, how to go about writing your plot. But wait, there's more. I have a little bonus tip for you, just as a thank you for watching, but also this is a tip that doesn't necessarily fit going on its own, and it goes along with all the previous 5 tips that I have given, and that is inspiration. Don't wait for inspiration to come. If you're waiting for the apple to fall on your head moment of realization, who knows when that's going to happen? If you know what helps you get inspired to get going, then okay, take what I say with a grain of salt. But I want to encourage you to not sit around on this brilliant idea of a story for years because you were afraid of failure or competing in a highly saturated market. Don't be like me and wait a really long time to start writing your book. You have to make time for it. Waiting to feel inspired to do it is unrealistic. If we applied that anywhere else in our lives, then we really wouldn't get much done, would we? Hey, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you watching my channel. Really do appreciate all the views that I get. And it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, followed, liked, hearted, commented, all those things. I will see your beautiful face in the next one. Bye.